Hey everyone, I'm Tom and welcome to the channel. Today we're going to be going over my reading plans for the month of October, and October is going to be a very wild card kind of month for me because I'm about to go on a vacation and a lot of my plans really hinge on how much reading I get done or the lack of reading that happens on that vacation. So I try not to do this and say that all of this is very, very much up in the air. Normally I like to be a little bit more rigid, but just keep in mind that this is definitely something that could change, but hopefully I get enough reading done on my vacation that my plans actually get to stay how I want them to be. But you can always check in on my weekly updates to see how that is going if you are so inclined. But let's go ahead and start with what I will be continuing from the month of September. These will be books that I started and will, continue on through the month of October. And first up, we have got to talk about Kingdoms of Death. This is book 4 of the Sun Eater series, and obviously not going to say too much about this. I actually don't really know what the premise of this book is or anything. I'm kind of going into each one of these blind. Obviously, I've read the previous book, so I have a general idea of where the series is going. But why am I reading this? And it's because I want to catch up. I want to catch up on the series. I have tickets. There's a big gala that's happening. I have VIP tickets to it. And I think it would be just kind of weird if I was there and hadn't read the last book yet. I'm sure I could. I don't think it would be a problem, but I don't want to be there trying to avoid spoilers and actually have conversations with other massive fans of this series. So obviously I would really, really like to do that if possible. And yeah, so Kingdoms of Death is definitely one I'm excited for. Right now, Howling Dark is still my favorite in the series, but I've heard some people really talk about this one. Actually, I hear people talk about all of the books in this series, so I'm very much looking forward to continuing that. Sun Eater is quickly becoming one of my favorite series and definitely something I'm always very excited to get to and to read. And then the other thing I will be continuing, and this is another very massive book, and this is definitely one that, I mean, if I can finish it in October, that would be amazing. It would probably be the fastest I've read any of these books. But I'm talking about The Grand Conspiracy by Janie Wirtz. This is book 5 in the Wars of Light and Shadow series. And, I just recently read all of the short stories in this series that I could before I moved on to this book. That's one thing that I kind of wanted to do as a check mark for myself, was to read all of the short stories before this book. There's one or two more short stories I can read. I think it's after book 6 or 7 or something like that. So I'm caught up to where I could be before I read this book, and I'm super excited to get into this one. I was just watching Talking Stories video, and John was talking about how the first 60 or so pages of this is crazy, and he just got me really excited to go into this one and start my journey back into the Wars of Light and Shadow. My original goal for this year was to finish this arc of the series. So this series is split into arcs. This is the Alliance of Light arc, and there's 5 books in this one. This is only book 2. So I'm definitely very behind on that goal, especially with how slow I read these. I really like to sit in this world, and I'll just be honest, the writing takes a little bit more for me to get through. It's just a different kind of writing. It's much more, I don't want to say difficult, because it's not that it's difficult, but it's just written in a way that not a lot of other things that I have read are. And so I definitely do take my time with this series. And, like I said, if I could finish this by the end of October, that would be awesome. Once again, this is going to be a physical book I'm bringing with me on my plane rides and stuff. So hopefully, maybe that's a good opportunity for me there. I don't know. I might also be trying to sleep a decent amount on the plane because one of them is a red eye. So that is all of the stuff that I'll be continuing from September into October, stuff that I've started and everything. Next up is going to be all the new stuff, and you're going to see, obviously, for October, I am leaning a little bit into the horror stuff. This will be the first year that I'm not reading a Nick Cutter book. I've read The Deep and The Troop from him before, and he's normally my go-to horror author, but I decided to mix it up a little bit this year and also really try to get in some very much shorter stuff. So the first one, it's from Stephen King. So, I think that counts as horror, even though I don't think that The Body by Stephen King really counts as a horror novel. And that's okay. Part of why I'm reading this is because it's still Stephen King. Stephen King is one of my favorite authors. I only started reading him last year, really, and I haven't read anything from him this year, and it just kind of fits in really well. So if you don't know what The Body is about, I don't know too much about it either, except for the movie that I haven't watched since I was a really little kid. But I think it's a group of 4 boys. I think that, they hear a rumor that there's a dead body down by the train tracks, kind of far away, and they go on an adventure to kind of see what is going on there. And so that is, yeah, I mean, that's kind of scary, right? I mean, this is, I think, much more of a coming to age kind of story than, a horror kind of thing. I think this is actually probably something that I should really read in the summer if I was somebody who really cared about reading in seasons. This is actually part of a collection called, is it All Seasons or something like that? 4 seasons. And it has this, and actually the next book, and what a transition there. The next book from Stephen King that I plan on reading this month, and that is, what is it? It's Shawshank. It's Rita Hayworth and Shawshank Redemption. Everybody obviously knows this from the movie where Andy Dufresne is in prison wrongfully. And I have watched that movie, but it's been so long that I really don't remember anything except like the very, very end of this. So this is another short story that I'm excited to get to. Once again, I don't really think this counts as like a true horror read for the month of October, but I think, Stephen King horror synonymous, they're kind of like, people, that's what people think of. So that is why I included that here, and I can kind of get that in. And I don't know what the other two short stories are that are included in that like bind up of stuff, but I don't plan on reading those two. These are the only two out of that. Once again, it's because, horror and Stephen King. But I do have one like true horror read on the plans for October. And I saw Jimmy from the Fantasy Network talking about this one, I guess maybe a month or so ago, and that is Crypt of the Moon Spider. And this is by, is it Nathan? I'm not 100% sure how to say that name, Balzinger or something? Ballinger? Anyway, I don't know too much about this one other than it's really creepy, and there's maybe some like very like grotesque stuff that happens in this one. Apparently it's not for the faint of heart. It's only like 85 pages, which as you can see, I'm trying to minimize. I'm still trying to read a bunch of different things, but minimize how long some of them are, because some of it is definitely very, very long with, Kingdoms of Death, the Janny Words Grand Conspiracy, and then, we'll get to the rest of the stuff that I'm trying to read. So like trying to keep it shorter. And like I said, vacation can really just destroy my reading. So that'll be another one. I think there's actually a sequel coming out sometime in October for Crypt of the Moon Spider. So if I really like it, maybe I could go, like I think it's like 100 or something pages. So like maybe I could double up there. I don't know. We'll see how that goes. And then the last thing that I plan on finishing in the month of October is the Sword Saint. This is book 3 of the Empire of Salt trilogy. The Darien is the first book in that. And once again, I don't actually know what this one's about. I'm really bad about like, I don't like to read the synopsis of books, especially once I'm into a series, because I feel like they can spoil so much. So like from a viewer perspective, it's probably annoying to hear me talk about this. But what I will say about this series is this is a fantasy series done in kind of, I don't want to say fast forward, but it's a book that gets to the point much quicker than a lot of like other epic fantasy series that you read, right? Like instead of taking 1,000 pages to tell you this story, it's doing it in 300 and it's doing it well. Does it maybe lack a little bit of the character depth that I would like? Yes, but the world building and stuff is still there, and the characters are still good. I'm not saying they're not, but they still are. And then on the novel front, the last thing I would like to do is to start Ashes of Man. The reason for that is obviously, once again, to catch up. I don't, once again, know anything about it other than it's, what is that, the 5th Sun Eater book? And yeah, Kingdom of Death is 4th, this is 5th, Disquiet Gods is 6th, and then I forget what the last one is going to be called. That is not out yet, but obviously those are my priority. Sun Eater, really want to be caught up for that. But that is my general reading plans novel-wise. I will also probably be continuing this behemoth on the comic front, because actually what's probably going to happen is I'm going to get a decent way into this one, and then it's going to have to go back to the library, and then I'm going to have to wait to see when I can get it back. So hopefully not too long. I'll probably read a couple other Superman comics. I have a couple other things sitting over there that I still need to read. I think Kingdom Come and Birthright are sitting over there on my shelf that I should have gotten, but those are kind of up in the air, just kind of depending. And then I'm going to challenge myself to try to get back into manga just a little bit. I love manga, but comics have really just replaced that reading. It's like I swapped them out for each other. And so I'm going to challenge myself to read the last chapter of Vinland Saga, because that is out. And, that's a story I've been reading and been caught up for a really long time. And I feel like I need to know what happens, right? And I'm curious, because I feel like that's a story that could have gone on for significantly longer, but I'm really curious to see how that final chapter is and how it ends there. And then, just that's gonna be my one challenge, to at least read that, and maybe that'll get me back in the mood, and I can do a better job of balancing comics and manga together. But that is my reading plans. Like I said, this could all fall apart if I don't read enough on this last little bit of September on vacation, and some stuff will bleed in from September, and maybe some stuff will get moved around. But that is also partially why I did the short story stuff, because if some stuff gets pulled in from September and they're novels, but I have all these short stories, like I can knock out the short stories pretty quick, and we can all be aligned for what I want to do to finish the year out. So yeah, that is everything. A very, fun month ahead of me reading wise. Not super horror focused here. I do like horror, but I just kind of sprinkle it in throughout the year. I don't like mainline it during October. But if you are reading a bunch of horror, definitely let me know any recommendations you have. If you sell me on something, especially if it's short, I might try to sneak it in. And even if it's not, I'm down to read horror throughout the year. So I'm always, up for a good recommendation. But definitely let me know anything else you're reading. If you're not a horror person, what else do you have going on in October? I'd love to hear all of it down in the comments below. You can always hit me up on the Discord that is linked in the description as well. But that is all for me. And to remember, read what you want when you want.